Hey all. So I wanted to take a couple minutes to give you an introduction to Toon Boom Harmony. Harmony is the software that we use at ETSU the most for all of our 2D animation. Now, there's a lot of good animation software out there. There's Adobe Animate, there's Open Toons, and then there's all the app software, Krita, and a whole bunch of different things that you can use out there. If you're doing this class and you are currently in person at ETSU, I want you to use Harmony. If you are doing this class remotely, if you're in one of the online sections, or if you're just watching this just to learn, that's fine. The first thing I want you to recognize, though, is that there's a lot of similarities to working in any animation software. And the first thing is that Harmony wants to know where you're going to be working. Now, we're using Harmony 24 Premium, which is the highest version of Harmony. It's not free. You can get a free trial for like 30 days, I think. And it is a subscription-based software. So if you decide you want to use it, there's tiers of the software. This is the highest version of the software. And so there's so many things that go into creating a project, so many different elements that might need to be saved. So the first thing it asks you is, where do you want to work? Where do you want to set this up? I have set up a folder on my D drive called 2D Animation. Select that folder, and I'll call this test scene. And then we'll hit create scene, and it should, in my 2D animation folder, create test scene. And it's going to open up Harmony. And I just want to show you that there's already a bunch of files or folders in here. There's a palette library, there's jobs, there's frames, and then there's environments. And these are very similar to Maya, where it has your scenes folder and stuff like that. And I want to show you that as I draw in here, if I use one of the drawing tools, let's say I use the pencil, and I just draw something right here really quickly. If I go back to that folder under frames, excuse me. Oh, I think I have to save my scene first. So if I go to File, Save, and then I go back under here, you'll see I have a whole bunch of new things, and it's not, I'm sorry, it's not under frames, it's under elements. You'll see that I now have a drawing for that drawing here. So every drawing I do in here is being saved as an individual image. So this right here is not your entire project. Your entire project is this whole folder. And so if you plan to move to a new computer, you have to take this whole folder with you. So again, very similar to how Maya works. So I'm going to move this off to the side just so we can continue to work inside of Harmony. And I'm just going to hit Control-Z to undo this I just did. So let's start with some basic navigation. Scroll in and scroll out will allow us to sort of zoom in and out. Spacebar will allow us to navigate. And so this is, or to pan from side to side. So this is very similar to what you would see in a lot of 2D software. And we're mainly right now going to focus on these top few icons over here. We're going to start with these two drawing options. We have a brush, we have a pencil. And let's do a stroke with each of them. So I do a brush stroke. I'm using my mouse right now. You may want to use you'll probably want to use some sort of pen input device, but so these will be pressure sensitive if you're using a pen. But right now I want to show you that there's really not much difference in those two lines, right? On first glance. So if we look at it more closely, we have these selection tools. This selection tool selects the entire drawing element that you just created, right? If I just drag across it, it will select it, or I can try to circle it and select it, but really you just have to contact it, right? And this will allow us to move it around or do whatever we want to. We're moving the entire object. The same with this, right? So that's what the black arrow does. The white arrow allows us to select a detailed element, like one of the building blocks of that element. So if I click the white arrow, you'll see the difference in the brush stroke is actually a shape that has a perimeter line, and I can use these points to change this shape, right? This is a series of Bezier handles. For those of you who are familiar with all this, this is a vector object, right? This is not made up out of pixels. This is made up out of math that allows us to get this shape, right? And so really, it's like I've painted a blob. That blob just happened to look like a line, right? Versus the pencil line, which was, if I select it, you'll see that what it actually is a single line that happens to have a thickness. Okay, and so there's a difference between these two, and there's a reason you might want to use one over the other. This will allow us to adjust this, but if I want to make the line thicker, I have to click on this white line, and I can go to, I think it's the centerline editor. Is that correct? No, I'm sorry. It's the pencil editor, and I can hold Control to add a point, and then I can make the thickness of that line thicker at that point. And so this can be controlled by the thickness over here in your tool properties as well. You can just make, if I just have the entire line selected, you can make, well, before I did that additional line, you can make the thickness of that line thicker or thinner in multiple ways. So we can adjust the thickness dynamically, but really it's a single line that happens to have a thickness. So essentially, this is, if you've worked in Illustrator, this is like the difference between having a line and a fill. So people by default have a tendency when they first open up Toon Boom to want to use the brush, because the brush is a little more, within your first few minutes, looks like it's doing more of what you want it to do. However, I actually feel like the pencil is has a little bit more control. Let me show you some of the tools that you can do with this, or some of the tricks you can do with this. So with our pencil line, let's say I needed to draw a box. So I'm just going to draw a couple of straight lines, right? And this is a very sloppy box. But one of the reasons I like to use the pencil is because there's additional tools in here. So if I hold down on the black arrow, click and hold down, I can go to this cutter option, and it allows me to trim off the overlap. And so I can very quickly get a clean shape. Now what I want to point out to you is this is still four shapes. Right? If we want to connect those together, we need to select those, and then over here, you'll see this weird little gap there. I can click this to merge those pencil lines. And so this is in the tools property, and it's the merge pencil line. It looks like a little band-aid. And so if I really wanted to go through here and fix all of these, I could just merge all those pencil lines. And we end up with nice, cleaner shapes. So with all of this, I can also add some color to this. So with my paint bucket, and I want you to recognize that with all this, I've been using the black color. So this is my palettes down here. And I have a range of colors, but I can't just choose any color. There's a reason for this. Like if you are working in an animated series, Bart Simpson's shirt is always the same color of red, right? And so there's within a series, just to make sure you're staying true to the character, you're staying on model, you will define color palettes. And so this lets us limit our color palettes, but also if we change our mind and we're like, oh, that's the wrong color of red for Bart's shirt, we can change it here and it will update in all of the animations. So if I wanted to fill this in, let's just call this box fill. I can change this color, and I can change it to, let's say, this pink color. That's nice. Go ahead, close that, and now I can fill in the box with that color. And recognize that at any point, if I change my mind and like, no, that's not the right color, when I change it in the color palette, it updates over here. So I should show you that at this point, throughout this entire thing, we have been working with vector objects. And what a vector object is these elements are made up out of mathematical equations. No matter how much I zoom in, it never becomes pixelated, right? And that's because this curve is just a mathematical calculation, right? This is how Adobe Illustrator works. This is how Adobe Flash works. However, Photoshop is, and probably Krita and some of the other 2D painting software, those are raster softwares. So that brings us down here to our layers. So this is our drawing layer. This is where we're doing our animation. Right? And I can add a new layer. If I click this plus and I add a new drawing layer, you'll see that it gives me the option if I want that drawing layer to be vector or bitmap. Bitmap is just another word for raster. Let's choose this, and I'll just call this bit layer, just so you'll know. And I'll hit add. And you'll see that suddenly, close that, suddenly on this bit layer, a lot of our tools are disabled. The pencil's disabled. And if I draw with a brush, some of our brush settings are different. Let's make our maximum size a little bigger, and I can paint with it. And this is going to feel a little bit more familiar to you because this is how a lot of 2D drawing software, Procreate, stuff like that, works with raster or bitmap. However, the difference is if I zoom in here far enough, it will eventually get pixelated. I cannot scale this object indefinitely because it'll just start to become blurry. Okay? My advice is to not use bitmap layers for your final animation. If you're going to use them, maybe you use those as the sketch layer, or you use those like the, to rough it in. But in the end, vector has the ability to be much more flexible. And again, I can scale this forever, and it never becomes pixelated, right? And that's going to be much more useful in your animation. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this layer, and I'll just show you. Actually, let's go ahead and hide this layer as well. And we're going to create a new drawing layer, and we'll call this ball. And I'm making both of these vector. Add. And I'm just going to create a pretty simple drawing with actually this new tool here. So instead of rectangle, I'm going to choose ellipse. I'm just going to draw, hold down shift to make it symmetrical. And I just drew a ball. Was not paying attention that I was in my box fill layer. So I can grab that and change that to black. And there we go. Now I have this ball. And you'll notice that what I have is a layer with a single drawing on it. In fact, let me go ahead and just delete this one just so it's easier to see. A layer with a single drawing on it. And if I drag my timeline forward, the ball disappears because it's not visible there, right? So we call this an exposure. So the ball layer is the drawing layer. Okay, think of this as the on the multiplane camera for Disney. This is one of the layers, right? And it's just a series of transparencies. And I can put a different drawing on every frame. I could go here to this next one, and I could draw a different ball. Actually, it's like ball. Right. And what I get now is another drawing here. I can zoom in on that just so you can see a little bit better. And so now you can see how animation is something that we can create with this, right? I could just do, instead of that drawing, just select that and hit delete. I could do another drawing up here close to it, but I can't really see it just yet. I can't see the previous drawing, and I don't want to have to guess. So I'm going to go over here to this little stack of pancakes here, and it's the onion skinning. And when I click that, I can see the drawing after it. Okay, and so I can do this, right, to have a second drawing. And so this is how I can start to make a bouncing ball animation. And I can go to a third one and make my third drawing. Okay. Now, what else I could do is from this, I could select this drawing element, and instead of redrawing it every time, I could hit Control-C, and then on this layer that is empty, I could hit Control-V, and I just paste that drawing in there, and I could move it a little bit. Okay, and so you can see where I'm starting to make this animation. I can go back and forth and just adjust these. Okay, so this is how we can do frame-by-frame animation very easily, and how you can manipulate that. Now I do want to show you, I'm going to go ahead and turn off my onion skinning here. And I do want to show you, if I go out to frame 10 on this, and I hit F5, I get an extension of this exposure. So we are on frame 4 here, and we exposed this drawing, right? And what I get is an unbroken, like there's no breaks in this drawing, right? I'm still on, if you'll notice if I highlight over it, I'm on ball-5.tvg, right? This is the 5th drawing I've made on this layer because I deleted one earlier. And so what this is doing is it's holding that drawing for as long as I want. So what does not work is if I go here and I try to drag this down now later, recognize I'm changing this entire exposure. So back here, I moved it there too, right? So that's not a way that I can just chop this up. What I can do though, is I can duplicate this as a new drawing. Right? So right now it's ball-5.tvg. If I click here, this would make an empty drawing. But if I click here, this will duplicate the drawing. So it looks like it cuts it in half, but really what it did is it made ball-6.tvg. And then I could move it, and we get that change. Okay? So this is how Toon Boom works for frame-by-frame animation. I'm going to go ahead and delete this layer, and we're going to do one more thing. I'm going to create a new drawing layer, and we'll call this ball 2. Add. And I am going to just do a single drawing of a ball here. Just hold shift to make it square. So this is the drawing element, and I can move basically this stroke. Like I drew a line. I can move this line around however I want to, right? And I'm moving the drawing element. But if I extended this out to 30, I hit F5, right? What I can also do is animate this entire drawing layer. So this is moving the drawing element, right? But this right here, this little box here, moves the entire drawing layer. So the entire drawing layer has a pivot point here, and you'll see that if I move that pivot point up to here, I can actually move the entire layer. Now, I don't want to undo that really quick. What I would really rather do, another way of working with this, are these tools up here. Okay. Oh, sorry, I undid too far. These tools up here, this is the translate, the rotate, and the scale tools. We also have a skew and some other stuff. If we start with this translate, again, let's move my pivot point over to here, and start here on this first frame. If I hit F6, you'll notice I get a little dot on my layer. And what this is a keyframe. I have a keyframe on my actual drawing layer, and I can move that drawing layer over time. So I could go here to frame 10, move this drawing layer down and over, and you see we get this connecting line. And so what that means is Maya's setting a keyframe on that drawing layer. And this little arrow where you saw me moving it around, that's the pivot point. That is how it's going to edit that, right? Like where is it going to rotate from or translate from? So I could go to there, take it up to here, and then from here, take it back down and out. What I have now is the ball moving. Now what you will notice though is the ball is moving kind of in these straight lines. And again, I can turn on ghosting here and we can sort of see the before and after frames of that. And we learned earlier about the 12 principles of animation. This is, arcs is one of those 12 principles of animation. Actually, we'll be learning about that soon, maybe even this week. So there is a way to control this. And I could go in here and just put additional keyframes to make it kind of arc out. But really what we're wanting is we're wanting this bounce to kind of look like it's bouncing in a bell curve. Right? I can extend my keyframes further out there, and you can see that it's moving in straight lines. So this is where I would bring in Toon Boom's equivalent to the graph editor. So if I hit this plus sign here, we're going to go to the function editor. And the function editor, it never loads on the first try. I usually have to go back, deselect, and select the ball, and go back to function, and you'll see that we have these graphs. Right? And this is just like Maya's graph editor, except it just is a little harder to manipulate sometimes. So what we see is positive x, y, and z. Z is a little confusing to you at first, and don't worry about that too much because essentially, although this looks like a 2D animation software, it's actually a 3D animation software as well. There is a depth element to this. I'm going to unhide Z because we don't really need that, but positive Y, you'll see is my up and down motion. Right? And I'm sorry, this is not positive, it's position Y. And position X is my forward and back. So I don't really need to worry about my forward and back as much. Maybe what I could do is just delete these two to make sure it looks like it's constantly moving forward. But then I can go in here and I can start to make changes to this. And you'll see these little yellow tabs. That allows me to pull this out and start getting some curve to this. Now, if you select this and change this from corner to smooth, it will lock those two together. We can get a little bit more like this, and you'll see now that my ball is bouncing in more of an arc. Okay? So one of the benefits to this is that I can change it. The other benefit to this is that I only have to really color one drawing. Right? So if I decide, this is a drawing here that I've made. If I decide I want to do my we'll call this ball fill, and I want to make that light blue. I only have to fill this one object, and now the entire thing is colored. Right? The other thing that you can recognize is even though I have these translates on here, I can still make changes to that drawing. So I can decide, right, let's say for right here, I want this drawing to be stretched or squashed. So what I can do is select the drawing and duplicate the drawing. And so it slices it, and that allows me then to go in here and grab this drawing and squash it down, stretch it out a little bit in both directions. And what we get now is not only is this layer moving, but the drawing changes right there. The problem is that it stays that for the rest of the animation. So I'm going to introduce you to one more thing here, and that is under our library. If I pull this down, I need a little bit more screen real estate here, you'll see this drawing substitution. And this is all of the different drawings that I have done in my animation. So right now we're seeing drawing 2 is exposed there, but here was drawing 1. And so really what I can do is just immediately after that, or let's go to say this frame here, I can just switch that back to drawing 1, and it plugs that in there. If I wanted to make a stretch drawing here, I can duplicate that, and then I'm actually going to cheat a little bit. I'm going to rotate it, maybe make it just a little bit wider. So that's drawing 3, and then here I can duplicate that drawing again and do the equivalent here. Stretch it out, make it a little thinner. It's a little too much. And so I'm getting just a little bit of a stretch right here before. And so now what we get is stretch map. Turn off my onion skinning just so you can see that. So we can get a little bit of a squash and stretch there with this ball. And again, when I get to here, if I want to reuse some of that, I can reuse my, wait, not there. I'm going to do it here. I can reuse my squash, and I can reuse my stretch.